We'll just take a moment to introduce our guest speaker today. We're very grateful to have Will Partin here representing Go Ministries. We're going to have different missionaries or representatives of those missionaries over the whole month of September. So this week's the Dominican Republic, and I told him he drew the short straw to get the Labor Day weekend because I know we've had a number of teams go down to the Dominican Republic. I've lost track, 6 at least, that have gone down, and many of those people are out of town. They told me to say hello on their behalf, but they wish they could be here today. Next week, we're going to have representatives from Thailand. The following week, we'll be talking about our partnership in Russia, and then the last week, we'll be talking about our partnership in Ghana. We want you to financially support these ministries and other ministries that we do in missions. So take that envelope. We typically raise $20,000 plus in this emphasis, and so we hope you'll contribute and make a sacrificial gift to that. You can do it online or, again, get that envelope. But I want to say a particular word for Will. I know everybody involved in our mission partnerships have great affection for them, but no more so than I have the most for Will. He's my favorite, I had to tell you. Because I've known him since he was a teenager, and he's 41 now. And so I've watched him grow into a fully devoted, fully mature disciple of Christ, great servant of the gospel, great minister. I'm so terribly proud of him, all the things he's done in his life. He's got a great family, wonderful people, and he may mention this, but I've been privileged to be at him at pivotal moments in his life. I remember when he said he was thinking about getting married, and I heard a little bit about her, saw a picture of her, said, "You better seize that opportunity, buddy." And he did. And then he felt a calling to go into the mission field after he'd only been married a few weeks. And I said, "You're crazy, but if God's called you, you need to go." And then he was called to adopt children and do other things in the course of his life. And I've been privileged that in many occasions he's called and said, "What do you think? And can you pray for me about that?" And again, I feel like he had a wonderful father who's with the Lord now. I'm his friend and his brother in Christ, but I feel like a paternal sense for him as well. I have such affection for him. I'm so proud of him. So hope you'll give him your full attention, and I'm grateful that he's present with us today. So would you welcome him with a round of applause?
We're going to show a quick video before I get started, and then I got some good responses for you on that one.
In the early 80s, Ramon Gabriel, along with his wife Tata and their 6 children, moved to the community of Olla del Caimito in Santiago, Dominican Republic, where there was a great need for education and discipleship. Out of compassion and obedience, they planted a church and launched a school. A few years later, Ramon met Brooke Brotzman, an American pastor with a passion for the global church. A partnership was formed, and Go Ministries was born. For more than 30 years, Go Ministries has focused on empowering local leaders in the Dominican Republic and Haiti to redeem people, renew communities, and restore creation through 4 focused areas of ministry: Go Community Development, Go Medical, Go Sports, and Go Church Planting. Now the global vision for Go Ministries is to plant 1,000 churches in 10 years all over the world through discipleship, mission, and multiplication. We invite you to mutual transformation by taking a trip or sponsoring a kid through our school. Join us in developing leaders to change the world.
I want us to be here this morning. I echo what Pastor Kelly has said. He has been a part of very pinnacle moments in my life as a pastor, as a friend, as a father figure. And you made the right call to tell me to marry Audrey because she's pretty special. And so we think the world of this church as well. We have, one of my greatest joys in life has been living in the Dominican and hosting short-term mission teams that come down to serve alongside of us and our local leaders there in the DR. And Immanuel has sent groups that we have just fallen in love with. When you experience that kind of service and that kind of sacrifice and that shared experience together for a matter of 8 days, you draw in pretty quickly and become really close. And so we think the world of this church. Thank you all so much for coming down to the DR and loving our neighbors. I told the people in the last service that it's rare that people have a group of individuals come to your workplace and say, hey, I'm here to serve. What can I do? Would anybody like to have that at their workplace? It'd be kind of nice. So we were able to experience that many, many times over with Immanuel and several other groups, which we are certainly thankful for. You all are a great representation of the global church, doing what it is that God has asked the church to do all over the world. As Pastor Kelly mentioned, he was my pastor for a long time. And I just think the world of his family, and anywhere he has been able to go, we're certainly glad to be a part of. Just kind of my personal history. My family, I've got a picture of my family. They're supposed to be here now, but I think it's tough to get the younger two ready, so they'll be here at some point. This is my wife, Audrey, and then our three little girls, Ruby, who's 9, June, who is 7, the little blondie, and then Georgia, who's 5, even though she looks like she's 10. And so that's our crew, and my wife and I, Audrey, moved down to the Dominican Republic back in 2005. As Pastor Kelly mentioned, we'd only been married for about 6 weeks, and we didn't know anything about ministry or Spanish or anything like that. And so we figured out, we began the journey of figuring out how to be married on an island, literally, and learning the language of Spanish there in the DR, and just learning how to do ministry. And so the people of the DR were super gracious in that process as they helped us learn the language, and were very patient with us. And then about 6 years into our marriage, we started adopting children. And so this is our family. Currently, we moved back to Louisville, Kentucky about 2 years ago, and our youngest daughter, Georgia, had some specific needs that couldn't get met down in the Dominican, so we moved to Louisville, where we are headquartered. Go Ministries is headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, and so I still get to go to the Dominican once a month, which is good for me because I kind of came home kicking and screaming a little bit because that's how much we love the DR. And so we currently serve as missionaries with Go Ministries stateside and also down in the Dominican Republic. So before I jump into scripture and stuff, can you guys pray with me this morning? Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for the opportunity to gather together as a church, to be able to worship you through song, to be able to worship you through offering. Lord, I know that we'll take communion as well, to be able to worship you through the sacrifice that you made for us. And now as we jump into your word, I just pray that you speak through us and to us, Lord. Thank you for what you're doing in this church, that it's a church that understands the importance of your kingdom all over the world. We love you, Jesus. It's in your son's name that I pray. Amen. When Pastor Chad told me that you all were doing a month committed to missions, I certainly was grateful, number one, that you all are a church that gets missions, that supports missions, that goes and serves in different places all over the world. And so thank you for taking this month to be able to hear about what God is doing globally, and thank you for supporting what it is that God is doing all over the world. I believe wholeheartedly in local missions and what's happening in people's homes and schools and churches. I also believe that it's both and. I believe that it's what's happening right here in your neighborhoods and in your backyards, and we're also called to engage in what God's doing all over the world. And so thank you for being a church that models that. Pastor Chad told me you guys are going to be spending some time in Nehemiah. And so this morning, just to kind of give a little bit of a background of the understanding of the story of Nehemiah, we're just going to look at kind of chapters 1 and 2 and do a summary. But we see that Nehemiah was among the Hebrews who remained in the Persian Empire following the 70 years of Babylonian captivity. And when Cyrus allowed for some of those captives to go back to their homeland, there were some people that actually stayed in Persia. And Nehemiah was among one of those individuals that stayed. And for those that stayed, some of them were able to gain employment in pretty high capacity in the government, and that was the case for Nehemiah. He actually became the cupbearer for the king, which can also be the role of someone who becomes really a confidant or an advisor to the king. But there came a time, and this is what we read in Nehemiah, where Nehemiah got word of what was happening in the city of Jerusalem, and he developed a great burden for what was happening to his people. He knows that the walls were taken down, were broken down, and the gates were burned with fire. And when he got word, he knew that he had to respond because he couldn't stand that this was happening in his hometown. And so he had a great desire to serve God's people. Matter of fact, his first words that we read in Nehemiah 1:4, when he heard the news of Jerusalem, he said, "When I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." When you think about the weight of what he felt that day, when's the last time we wept and we mourned and we fasted for something? in the word here, we can understand that this was heavy on Nehemiah's heart. And needless to say, Nehemiah was concerned, so now he carried this burden for his people. We go on to read it in the story, and so what does Nehemiah do with this burden that is laid heavy upon his heart? He prays to God, and then he goes and he asks the king if he can leave to go help God's people in Jerusalem. When he arrives to Jerusalem, he's surveying the land, he's surveying the damage, and he realizes that he's been called to help rebuild the walls. In verse 17, he says, "Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." And with God's gracious hand upon him, he casts a vision for what it is that God has laid upon his heart. So he goes from being heavily burdened to then casting a vision for what it is that God asks of him. As we continue to understand this story in Nehemiah, when he went and told a few people what he was going to do in rebuilding the wall, they replied, "Let us start building." Immediately they said, "Let us start building." So they began to work. People asked if he was rebelling against the king, and his response was, "The God of heaven will give us success." And so we can see Nehemiah going from having this heavy burden to casting a vision to then living it out on mission. And I love this story because I've had several conversations, I've had moments in my life, and you guys may be able to understand this as well, where we may be burdened by something, we may have something that is really heavy upon our heart, and we might start having thoughts and visions of what we could do, but sometimes the most difficult task is then going and doing it, casting that vision, getting people to come with us, and then living our life on mission for the sake of the kingdom. But we see here that Nehemiah took that burden, casted a vision, invited people to be a part of it, and then they went and lived out on mission. And as the story goes, as I'm sure that you guys know, Nehemiah, he organized, he managed, he supervised, he encouraged, he ran into opposition, he confronted injustice, but he kept going until the walls were rebuilt. And the wall was rebuilt in 52 days. And so this says that Nehemiah wasn't just a man who carried a burden or casted a vision, but he was a man of action. He lived on mission. And so when Pastor Chad was telling me that this was a story that you guys were going to be spending time in this month, I started to read it, and I really started to resonate with the history of Go Ministries. And you guys saw a little bit of it there in that video. But over 30 years ago, there was a man named Ramon Gabriel who was from the Dominican Republic. He and his family, his wife Tata and their 6 children, they lived in a city called San Francisco de Macorís, which is about an hour and a half away from Santiago, where we are located. But he heard of this community that didn't have a church, and it didn't have a school, and it was really rough living conditions. And so he left his job in insurance and took his family, as they felt led. They were burdened for this community, and God gave them a vision to go plant a church and a school, and they left. And as the story tells it, as we've talked to Gabriel and his family, they lived month by month really on a big can of tomato paste and spaghetti noodles. That's what he and his family ate for many, many, many months as they planted this church and started this school. And so he engaged in the community in several different ways. The way that he went about planting a church was he saw the needs of the community, so he started that school with about 30 kids. He saw that there was a local basketball court in the community and there was a softball field, so he started engaging in sports ministry. He also knew that there were great medical needs in his community, so he started asking for local partnerships from hospitals to be able to do medical clinics in his community. He also started small businesses and started training people in specific skill sets so they could go and get jobs. He didn't just go plant a church and have a Sunday service. He engaged in his community. That's how he lived out his mission. And then about 30 years ago, there's a man named Brooke Brotzman, who you all saw in the video as well, who's a youth pastor up in the Chicagoland area, and he had a deep burden for the youth that he was serving in Chicago. And so he wanted to expand the horizon and let them understand what it's like to live out the gospel, not just in their hometown, but all over the world. And so he started taking these kids on mission trips to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And so one year when he went to the DR, he met Ramon Gabriel and his family, and he was blown away about how God was doing something so incredible with such little resources. And so Go Ministries began 30 years ago. And when I think about what happened in Brooks' life, the pastor from Illinois, he had a burden to be able to teach people from the States about overseas mission. He had a vision to start taking youth down on mission trips, and then he lived it out. That was his mission, was to do that. And we've been talking a lot because we're celebrating 30 years of ministry this year, and it's pretty amazing how the vision that was given to Brooke 30 years ago that was written on a napkin in a restaurant is still our vision for today. And so our vision for Go Ministries, well, the burden, let me start with the burden of Go Ministries, was birthed through understanding poverty, lack of resources, lack of education, the need for discipleship, the need for parental influence, spiritual emptiness, and a lack of purpose. These are the things that when Brooke was taking people on mission trips, they experienced in the streets of Santiago. And so then Go Ministries casted a vision to empower local leaders to do ministry in their own culture and context. See, the ministry isn't about just mission trips and Americans going down and doing all the work and then taking off after 8 days. It's about undergirding the work of passionate people who are super capable there in the Dominican. And so the mission was to raise up leaders in church planting, sports, community development, and medical. And so I realize sometimes that a lot of people that partner with our organization don't fully understand what it is that we do as Go Ministries. And so I wanted to take a moment just to explain a little bit more about who we are and how we do ministry. And so we work in 4 different, what we call focused areas of ministry. And those are them. So first is Go Sports. You all saw a little bit of that on the video as well. We have about 600 kids that come to our facilities that get trained and discipled and mentored, Bible classes, English classes, tutoring by coaches that are Dominican and Haitian and teachers that are Dominican and Haitian. And so they invest in the next generation of the Dominican Republic through sports. In our medical ministry, about 5 years ago, 3, 4 or 5 years ago, we finished a state-of-the-art medical building right there in the heart of Olla del Camito in that community that serves about 700 patients every single month. We also partner with our church planting movement and go into 110 different communities and do mobile clinics. And so we see somewhere between 12,000 and 15,000 patients every single year and just try to meet the most basic needs of people for medical care. In our community development area of ministry, we have 11 nutrition centers where we serve meals, 1 hot meal a day, 6 days a week, to kids that are in need. We've also started some small businesses like a screen printing company. We actually just are starting to farm some land and do plantains and things like that. We've started a Go store where teams come down and they purchase items that are made by people in communities there in the Dominican Republic. We've also launched a coffee company as well that helps us be self-sustainable in ministry. Also within our community development focused area of ministry is the school that Gabrielle started 30 plus years ago at this point. There were about 30 kids to start in that school, and now we have 600 kids that are getting a private Christian education as they prepare for what's next for them in their life. And then over the past few years, what we wanted to do is we wanted to multiply the efforts of what Ramon Gabriel started 30 years ago. And so we launched into a church planting movement where our desire and our vision is to plant 1,000 churches in 10 years all over the world. And the beauty of the way that these churches are being planted is as someone plants a church, all of those resources of sports and medical and community development come with it. And so right now we're in about 110 communities and in 9 prisons in the DR. And so there are churches that are being planted in prisons. There are churches that are being planted in different communities. There's churches that are being planted in cigar factories. There's churches that are being planted in businesses, because we want to make sure that everybody understands that they can pastor their community and meet their needs. And so when it's time for a pastor to say, hey, can we get a sports clinic? Our sports people show up. Hey, can we do a medical clinic? Our medical people show up. Hey, could you help us start a business? We go help start a business. And so that is what is happening right now with our church planting movement. And one of the most exciting parts is we're getting ready to launch in Argentina and Panama and Costa Rica and Mexico and some other places that have continued to call. So we are just blown away about how God is blessing our ministry. And it all started 30 years ago when God laid a burden on Gabriel's heart, casted a vision, and then he started living his life on mission. We all got invited into this process. And when I think about people from Immanuel who have come in and done a mission trip with us, we were invited into this large vision together a long time ago. Briefly, just kind of my story because it matches up with the burden, vision, and mission portion. I was 17 years old living in Louisville, Kentucky. The only thing I cared about was basketball. I was 17, and that's all I wanted to do was play hoops. And so we had a new coach come in my senior year of high school, and he asked me to go on a mission trip with another teammate of mine. He said, I want to go and take you. He had just been to Poland, had a great experience, but he said, I've met a group of people that are doing missions down in the Dominican Republic. Will you come with me? Well, I didn't really know anything about it, but when he mentioned that we would be doing a basketball camp and we'd be playing against local competition at night, I was in. So there were about 11 of us that went down to Santiago for 10 days, and I had no idea what it was that God was going to do in my heart during that time. I grew up with wonderful pastors. I grew up with an older brother that I could follow, who's 4 years older than me, that encouraged me. I grew up with an incredible dad, an incredible mom. I grew up with a sister that was encouraging, had great coaches and teachers and mentors in my life. And so after spending several days in Santiago and seeing that literally kids were just kind of pushed out their door, left alone for the day until they came home at night, I was burdened. I recognized that God had invested in my life through incredible people to be able to get me to where I was and where I was going in the future. People that helped me know who to marry, how to go about adopting children, how to follow a call to be led into ministry, how to be there with me when I was really struggling through stuff, how to teach me about confession and repentance and all of those things. I had those people in my life. These kids didn't. And so I didn't know it when I was 17, but God had planted a seed in my heart that developed a great burden. And so in 2005, Audrey and I got married, and as you mentioned, 6 weeks later moved to the Dominican. And our vision was to empower local coaches that can invest in the lives of kids through sports. And so we just started inviting anybody that we could meet. We would go to professional basketball games, we would go to baseball fields, and we would ask people to be a part of this camp and this league. And then slowly it turned into really a disciple-making sports ministry to where now we have 600 kids that are in that program, and it's growing. And so that was our mission, was to start Go Sports. And so that's kind of where we are today. We have those 4 areas of ministry: church planting, community development, sports, and medical. And then we have teams that come and are a part of what it is that we do. And so we serve a ministry that we certainly have fallen in love with over the past 16 years that we've been a part of it. But there was something that I was reading in the story of Nehemiah that really stood out while I was preparing for this message. It comes from, Nehemiah was speaking to the Persian king in verse 7. He said, "If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah? And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me the timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy? And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my request. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me." When I read this portion, it really impacted me, especially in this season of our life and ministry. See, about 10 years ago, our entire staff, we were outgrowing our facilities, and part of our strategy is growth. We wanted more opportunities to be able to invest in the lives of people. And so our staff got face down on the ground, and we said, "Lord, what is it that you have for us next? Where is it that you want us to go?" And so he revealed to us this plan to build a complex, which is not something that we necessarily wanted to do. But what happened is we have started building something called the Leadership Development Complex. You saw the image of it right at the end of that video. It's a $25 million project that we said, "Lord, if you are not in this, then we're going to fall on our face and look silly." The process has been difficult. It's been met with great resistance and roadblocks as we tried to get permits and purchase land and government help and all that sort of thing. So a process that started over a decade ago, we didn't break ground until October of 2017. But what God has done since has been amazing. Well, just last week, we got a phone call that the president of the country was going to come visit our facilities, inaugurate it for us, and meet with us. Well, we're blown away. We've been working there for 30 plus years, and no president has ever shown any interest in what it is that we're doing. They're grateful that we serve in their impoverished communities, but they have never gotten behind what we do. And so we had the opportunity to sit down with the president and ask him for help. We basically said, anytime we try to bring a container of equipment to do work here in this country, it gets stopped in customs, and we have to pay crazy amounts of money to get it out. 4 months later, we just had 285,000 meals that we brought in for Haiti relief that have been sitting there in customs. And so we've run into roadblocks because government wants money and things like that. And so as we were talking to the president, we explained these things to him. We said, we just need help to be able to do ministry here. Would you clear a path? And so I was reading Nehemiah. That's what he was asking. He said, King, will you please clear a path so I can go and serve God's people who are in desperate need? Well, it was crazy. About 48 hours later, we had things released from customs. We have letters that we need of approval. And so I'm experiencing right now what it is that Nehemiah experienced when he asked the king to clear the path. But the best part about that passage is he said, and because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my request. It's not because of who Nehemiah was or what he was doing. It's not because of Go Ministries and what Go Ministries is doing. It's because God's gracious hand is upon us. And so we are a ministry that you all support. And we are so grateful that you all care about what's happening all over the world. I had an opportunity to speak at a retreat last week to a bunch of sophomore kids and from Louisville, a school in Louisville, and the topic was compassion. And I want to end with this. But I looked up the definition of compassion. It says to recognize the suffering of others and then take action to help. When I think about global missions, I think that's what happens. It's so easy to see it in third world countries that people are suffering and they're hungry and there's poverty and there's things like that, so we can engage. But I also recognize that we have those things here locally too, in our own homes and schools and communities. But that's what compassion does. Action is what separates compassion from sympathy or pity or empathy. You can feel sorry for someone or have a burden for someone, but when it's compassion, there's action. And compassion is a tangible expression of love for those who are suffering. Nehemiah had that for his people. We have that for our people in the Dominican and Haiti and all over the world, and you all have that for the people in your community and to the ends of the earth. So this is the story of Nehemiah, of Go Ministries, of Immanuel UMC, and it is a joy that we get to accept that burden, cast a vision, and live on mission. I want to read Matthew 25 because I think it's important that we understand this. We know that salvation is just the beginning. We know that eternity awaits us. And those are two incredible gifts that God has given us. But that's not all we live for. He's asked us to engage in compassionate ways in the lives of other people. And there will be a day in final judgment, and this is what the word of the Lord says in Matthew 25:35, starting in 34. Then the king will say to those on the right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply this, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Thank you for doing that here. Thank you for doing it in the Dominican and in Russia and all the other places that you guys support. We're excited about teams starting to come again at some point. We have great relationships with wonderful people that have come to serve with us. And so thank you on behalf of our staff and our ministry for partnering with us. It's a joy to be with you all. Thank you.
For more than 30 years, we have not just worked in this place. This is not just a job nor a ministry. This is our calling in life. Do you understand what's happening here right now? Is kids are getting an opportunity to grow and to learn and to dream and to have vision and to believe that it is possible for them to change the world. This is a big project, almost $25 million, and we've raised a lot of money over the years, and we've brought all of it here and spent in the economy with people here. We buy our medicine here. We buy food and supplies here. All of our staff raise their own support, and they don't take one dime for working here. It is amazing what God is doing, but I have something to tell you. There is so much more to do. And with your help, we will be in victory.